my story time. Today we're going to read Mrs. Toggle Zipper. When Mrs. Toggle's children arrived at school in the morning, they changed in the hall from their boots to their shoes. When the bell rang, they picked up their boots and book bags and marched along to their room. They stuffed their boots and bags into their cubby holes and hung up their coats. They sat down at their desks. "Good morning, Mrs. Toggle," the children said in their best morning voices. "Good morning, class," said Mrs. Toggle in a usually grumpy voice. Then the children noticed that Mrs. Toggle was still wearing her coat, the big puffy fuchsia color one that she got for Christmas. "Mrs. Toggle," yelled Joey, "you forgot to take off your coat." "I didn't forget to," said Mrs. Toggle uncomfortably. "I can't take it off because the zipper is stuck. I'm afraid it's going to be a long, hot day." "How does the zipper get stuck?" Nina asked. Mrs. Toggle fanned her face. "How does any zipper get stuck? First, a tiny bit of cloth gets caught in it. Then you pull and keep pulling a little too hard, and before you know it, you're trapped in your coat like a hand in a cookie jar." The children gathered around Mrs. Toggle's desk to see for themselves. "Yep," said Joey. "That zipper sure is stuck." The others nodded. "What's worse," said Mrs. Toggle, "the thingamajig is gone." "The what?" said the children. "The thingamajig that you pull the zipper up and down. Mine is lost." "Oh," groaned the children. They all thought happily about their own coats hanging on the hooks with the zippers open and the thingamajig still on them. "Maybe we can help," said Carolina. "It's worth a try," said Mrs. Toggle. Mrs. Toggle braced her feet on the floor. She leaned forward in her chair and held out her arms. Some children grabbed one sleeve, some on the other sleeve. Paul and Nina grabbed fistfuls of collar. "Now!" yelled Mrs. Toggle, and everybody pulled. Everybody landed with thuds and bumps in a heap on the floor. Mrs. Toggle's collar was as far as her nose, but no further than that. Paul wanted to get busy learning the timetables. "Mrs. Toggle," he said, "let's go to the nurse's office. Maybe Mrs. Scott can help you." So Mrs. Toggle and the children trudged down to the office of Mrs. Scott, the school nurse. When Mrs. Scott saw Mrs. Toggle's hot red face, she reached for the thermometer and popped it into Mrs. Toggle's mouth. Mrs. Toggle shook her head. "Don't talk with the thermometer in your mouth," said Mrs. Scott sternly. "I'll telephone your mother." Mumbled Mrs. Toggle. "Mouth closed," ordered Mrs. Scott. Nina spoke up. "She's not sick, and she doesn't live with her mother because she's a grown-up. Mrs. Toggle is hot because she can't get her coat off. The zipper's stuck, and the thingamajig is lost." "Then we must pull it off," said Mrs. Scott. "Oh, we tried that," Paul said. "This time we had a bandage," the nurse answered. "Bandage make boo-boos better. But first, Mrs. Toggle, you must take that thermometer out of your mouth." Mrs. Scott stuck a bandage on the zipper where the thingamajig was supposed to be. Then she pulled, and the children pulled, and they all ended up with thuds, bumps, and bangs on the floor of Mrs. Scott's office. Mrs. Toggle's collar was as far as her nose, but no further than that. Mrs. Scott shook her head. "I must call the principal. He'll know what to do with you." The principal, Mr. Stickler, left the important matters on his desk to hurry to the nurse's office. Mr. Stickler frowned when he saw Mrs. Toggle. "Mrs. Toggle, it's against school rules to wear your coat all day." "I'm sorry," said Mrs. Toggle, "but I can't take my coat off. The zipper's stuck." "Tell him about the thingamajig," said Nina. "The what?" said Mr. Stickler asked. "You know," said Paul. "The what's it?" "The doodad," said Carolina. "The whatchamacallit," said Joey. "My students are right," said Mrs. Toggle. "The thingamajig is missing from my zipper." The principal frowned again. Mrs. Toggle, he said, in my job I have learned that if you want to get out of a tight spot, you must follow the rules. Pay attention, children, he said. Make 2 straight lines. 1 line pull on the right arm. The other line pull on the left. Mrs. Scott, you shall be responsible for the collar. I shall pull on Mrs. Toggle's feet. We've tried that, said Joey. Pulling doesn't work, Nina agreed. Did you make straight lines, said Mr. Stickler. That's the rule. Stay in straight lines. Now get ready, get set, pull! The children and Mrs. Scott pulled in one direction. Mr. Stickler pulled in the other direction. Mrs. Toggle tried to make herself small and wiggly. With thuds, bumps, bangs, and a kerplop, they all ended up on the floor at once more. Mrs. Toggle's collar was as far as her nose, but no further than that. Mr. Stickler said, enough of this. We don't want holes in the school floor just because of Mrs. Toggle's zipper. I'm calling the custodian. I'm afraid he'll have to cut this coat off. No! Yelled the children, and Mrs. Collar cried, never! The custodian, Mr. Abel, arrived wearing his big work apron, tools buckled in every pocket. He looked at Mrs. Toggle in his coat. Is the building too cold for you? He asked kindly. Maybe the thermostat's off. I'll go check. Wait, said Mr. Stickler. See, said Carolina, Mrs. Toggle can't get her coat off because the zipper's stuck. Yes, the principal said, and there's a problem with the thingamajig. Mr. Abel listened carefully. He said, I can see the pull tab is gone. The what? The children and Mrs. Toggle and the nurse and the principal all together. I said the pull tab's gone. Don't worry, I've seen worse. Mr. Abel pulled a pair of needle-nose pliers out of one huge apron pocket. He used the pliers to loosen up the grip of the zipper's metal teeth on the shiny fuchsia-colored lining of Mrs. Toggle's coat. Gently, with his large fingers, Mr. Abel eased the lining away from the teeth. Then he slid the zipper down. It opened completely. Mr. Abel helped Mrs. Toggle off her fur coat. A happy smile spread over Mrs. Toggle's face. Mrs. Scott and Mr. Stickler and the children cheered. You should get a new pull tab for that zipper before you zip it up again, said the custodian. I surely will, said Mr. Abel, said Mrs. Toggle. I am forever grateful for you. The principal went back to important matters. Mrs. Scott rushed off to check a child for chicken pox. Mrs. Toggle and the children trespassed to the room to tackle the timetables. Mr. Abel pulled a small pad from his huge apron pocket and wrote himself a reminder. Remember to look up thingamajig in the dictionary. The end. Thank you for watching, Kids Club. Bye!